Hello, my name is Austin. I'm the director here at Fishtown Films. You can see our work here on our channel, or you can check out our feature, Citywide, now streaming on Amazon and Vimeo. I'll put the link in the description down below. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to Stumble Upon. I'm Austin.
And I'm Emily. Today we are discussing Bull Durham, written and directed by Shelton.
As always, there'll be plenty of swearing and spoilers.
But if that doesn't scare you, Nuke's fastball should, because you never know if he's breathing out of the correct eyelid.
This episode brought to you by Citywide, now streaming on Amazon.
Rent or purchase tonight, host a movie night, invite all your friends over, and know that every dollar spent on supporting indie filmmakers like us helps us make the next Sapphic indie.
So this film has been in my life for a really, really long time. Like, I remember watching it when I was in high school in the 90s. It was one of those kind of secret films that I tended to try to sneak by watching that my parents weren't particularly aware of. It felt like a kind of R-rated film that I could watch because it was about sports, but also had a lot of swearing and some nudity and just kind of hit all the things that my teenage brain was addled with. But as I've grown up, we've become big fans of watching this film every year, every kind of summer. And I was wondering, what draws you to this film?
One of the things I love about this movie is that it feels like summertime. It embodies summertime in the way it almost breathes the hot humidity of July. And it is such a wonderful representation of an American summer. And so I'm always drawn to it because of that very first scene when Annie is walking to the minor league stadium, and you get to see a little bit of the town, which is just a small, nothing special kind of town that she's walking through. And it's that wonderful moment of twilight as the sun is setting, but the energy of everyone being there and excited about the live performance of baseball that they're all going to witness. It is a drama. It is sort of like theater in that you never know how it's going to turn out, and you have the energy of the stadium that kind of feeds the players as you do in theater. And it's just a lot of fun. It's just a wonderful, it's a vibe. I find this movie is a vibe, and for me it is a summer vibe, and that's kind of what I love about it.
Yeah, it's fascinating because as you're talking about it as theater, Annie herself in the film is framing it as church. The whole opening sequence, she's talking about the different religions and that she's followed or interacted with in her life so that she can kind of get a better understanding of who she is. And baseball has become the church for her, which is kind of what all of the film then follows is. But something that you said there, I want to ask you a follow-up question, if you don't mind, which is, the fact is, your experience for Americanism is very different from mine because I grew up in America as a country, whereas you grew up all over the world and looked at America and what was American in a very different way. So it interests me that the things that you pick up on are how American it is because of your own experience.
Yeah.
Is it just the houses? Is it the ritual of baseball, which wasn't as big a sport in Europe when you were growing up?
It wasn't
there?
a sport at all in Europe when I was growing up. I played it a little bit, but there was no going to a baseball stadium. I really equate baseball with Americanism from my childhood because that's what was presented in movies and television. Kids would go around the corner and play baseball with all their friends, and they would do pickup. I would play pickup soccer with my friends in Europe. And it always just has this feeling of Americanism in the sense of community, in the sense of walking to places, which I think is ironic because living in America now, we walk everywhere, but Americans do not walk everywhere, and everyone in Europe walks everywhere. So it's weird that I think it's because my grandmother walked everywhere in Philadelphia when we would come back every couple years, and that was my experience in America, was every couple of years a few weeks in Philly to kind of get to know Americanism and what it felt like. And kids played baseball in the alley, and my dad would take us to Philly games. And
wasn't your grandfather
My grandfather, my father's father, played for he was drafted to the Phillies, but his mother didn't understand that if she signed him up to be on the baseball team, that he wasn't getting put into a workhouse, which is what she thought was going to happen. So she wouldn't let him join. And Connie Mack was trying to sign him for the Phillies. So yeah, baseball is certainly part of my family. I would collect baseball cards, even though I didn't understand them. So it was just a cinematic representation of what I had been told through books and film and TV. And then I think it's just the way it's hot. Mm-hmm. There's a heat to the East Coast that I didn't experience other places. Even though living in the tropics was very hot in Indonesia, it is a different kind of heat. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like they caught it the way that, even though we know it was shot in October and November, it feels hot. The way you feel like they're dripping with sweat, everything is heavy, the air is heavy. She's wearing sneakers in the rain in that last scene and her dress, and she's soaked through, and you just finally feel like she's refreshed for the first time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. There's something about that really spoke to me as a kid.
Yeah, I feel the same sort of thing. Like it's interesting. There are a lot of films that I grew up with that I look back on and think to myself, what was I thinking? Like, what the fuck was I thinking? Like, where was my head? And obviously as a child and as a young adult, like your head hasn't truly formed, like your brain isn't fully functioned in the way that it's going to. It isn't fully functional in the way that it becomes later in your life. And so to find that this film actually holds up, and some of the things that I found funny when I was a kid, like all the time that Nuke misses the catcher's mitt and like throws it into the press box, or hits the bowl, or hits the bat boy, or like all these things that I found really funny as a child have become part of like the texture of the film, the tapestry of the film, and the things that really resonate with me resonate in a completely different way now. The kind of somberness of what a player has versus what the organization wants. Like all these different kind of levels to the film that are present that as a young person I would have no idea about, but yet there was so much of what you're talking about, the fun of baseball, all the joy that these people are having as they're sitting in a shitty bus driving around to the next like terrible small town that you would never visit on a road trip ever, as they're just like moving around through their lives. It's like all this joy that they're presenting has now shown me like the joy of youth, and now as I'm moving into a different stage of my life, like this kind of melancholy that can come with like having a dream that doesn't love you back.
Yeah.
And there's just like there's something really fascinating about all of that text in this film that hits both when I was a kid and solidified a love for this film and a love of baseball that I still have, even though it's kind of moved away a little bit to my primary source of sports entertainment. Mm-hmm. But it's a fascinating kind of conversation that I have with myself of what it means now versus what it meant then. And I think, if I might just say, that it means something to me in the way that an American pastime now resonates with me.
Baseball. Why, Jimmy? That's the national sport.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to bring up David Mamet. Mm-hmm. It's interesting you bring up the ages, both in your age as you grew up watching this film and how, as our favorite saying goes, the text is an object. It changes perspective depending on where you're standing, which is, of course, a quote from Clouds of Sils Maria. So it's interesting to think that the text of the film changes as you age, mm-hmm. which is any good piece of art should do that. But it's also interesting to think about how beautiful the different ages are in the film between Crash and Nuke, as well as Annie. But thinking about, that youthful exuberance of like, I've just started out in his first year at single A baseball. Mm-hmm. He snatched up to be a major leaguer within a few months.
Yeah.
If even that, maybe it's just a few weeks.
No, it's months. It's the whole season.
Okay. So he over the course of a few months, suddenly is in the major leagues. Does he stay there? We don't know. Mm-hmm. Can he make it? We don't know. But just that dichotomy of him getting slingshot into the majors while this incredibly talented man in Crash cannot break in again. Like he got it for a minute, he got dumped again, and he could never get back there. But then getting to watch him pivot from that dream to being like, well, maybe I don't have to give up on that dream because I worked with this kid, because I discovered I have this skill set, and because he just got slingshot into the majors. Well, maybe that is my next step. Maybe what I can do is be a manager, become a coach. I can be part of the team in a different way than I ever planned.
Yeah.
And I love getting to watch that pivot. You don't get to see that in cinema a lot.
Well, it's thematically, it makes sure that the film doesn't end on a really sour note. Like the film ends up being about hope for Crash and for Annie and also for Nuke. Like everybody, like their dreams might change a little bit, but it also ends with the idea that you still can have dreams even if they change on you. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think that pivot, if you think about it, like even in our ages, we started out watching this film when we were closer to the character Nuke's age. Mm-hmm. And now we're closer to the manager's age. Mm-hmm. And like we have had the gamut of all these sorts of experiences in our lives. And there are players within the film that fit each different kind of area in which we are. And Crash works as a character, as somebody who bridges the gap between youth and experience. Like he's right in the middle of what is it, William Blake's.
I was going to say, is he Blake?
Yeah, he like in some ways with all the poetry that's read off by Annie in this from Whitman, and I think she also quotes Blake as well. But
she does.
Like all of this, like in some ways, the Song of Innocence and the Song of Experience is a prototype bracket for what this film is. Like you have Innocence being Nuke, and you have Experience being Annie and Crash, and you have these two songs singing at each other, telling the same story, but with different experiences. And it's a fascinating kind of way to look at this piece of art, which I would say most people will watch and be like, well, just shut the fuck up, Austin. Like it's about somebody who throws a ball. Sometimes he catches a ball. Sometimes it rains. Like it's basically just that. Why are you bringing something else in?
But isn't the theater?
Yeah.
It's a simple story that's then made complicated.
Yeah.
Theater is just, a person falls in love, a person dies, a person kills someone, a person leaves a gun on the table and we don't know what's going to happen. Or maybe it's a rope. There's a lot of very simplified stories that get to become more complicated once you actually add humans in. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Baseball is theater.
Yeah.
All sports are theater, really.
And as Annie says, and I think that's a really good description of this film, it is about what church means to these people, because it is a religion to them. They go to the ball yard. They have their rituals. They have their superstitions. They have the things that they believe matter, that happens between the chalk out lines of the pitch. Like it's what means something to them, and how they play it, how they experience their lives within the lines based on the rules that somebody has created for this. They live their lives. They live and die on each play. They live for all the glory. They die with all the pain. Like it's a fascinating kind of pitch towards that.
And I think I'm jealous. I'm jealous of their passion. I'm jealous of the community. I'm jealous of the ritual. Mm-hmm. I'm a recovering Catholic, and I loved the ritual of church. I think there's something beautiful about the repetition, about the poetry of it, about the traditions, the incense, the holidays. Like there's something wonderful about it, and the community that's built up around it. And as a recovering Catholic, I recognize how complicated the church is, and why I stepped away is for all very good reasons. And so in that whole, it's like, wow, I would love to have the church of baseball. Mm-hmm. That sounds amazing. It's reliable. It happens every season. You get to go to all these games and enjoy the community around it. And I love that it's not a major league team.
Yeah.
I love that it's not even a big minor league team. It's a teeny tiny shitty single A minor league team, and I think that is what makes it the most special.
And most of the people that are playing in the games or coaching the games are never going to achieve anything more than this. Mm-hmm. This is their high watermark for a professional sports career, and And I think that the film does a really interesting job and a really good job honoring that level of professionalism. Like the film doesn't like we were talking about this the other day, it doesn't have this incredible like arc towards the big game. They don't win the minor league World Series. They don't do anything that is glorious or stupendous. They just go to the ballpark in and out every day. They have a very simple existence, and it's kind of ramshackle, and it's kind of like a Shaggy Dog type of story, because there's nothing, it doesn't really feel like anything happens except a lot of life is lived and people's lives change. And there's something beautiful about how, like, within the confines of this kind of religious experience, a life is lived.
Something that I love is because we're focused on, as you just said, the professionalism of this single A minor league team in the kind of mundane repetition of a film that isn't focused on the big game. What we're doing is because we're putting the camera on it, we're valuing the professionalism of this sport in a way that right now, currently, we only value major league teams. In fact, we even only value the teams that are winning. I'm so tired of the celebrity culture that we have made around sports and film and art and everything else in between, music. And we stop valuing the person that is just plugging away and being professional at it, even if they never make it big, even if nobody knows their name, if they're not a household name, they're not, as big as Martin Scorsese. They're not as big as Leonardo DiCaprio. Yeah. They're not as big as fill in the blank sports person reference, which I can't give you.
Yeah.
LeBron James. Woo! Yeah. I came up with one.
Nailed it.
I don't know sports. But you know what I mean? Like the focus of this film on this little tiny town, on this little tiny league, this little tiny game where nobody's winning. Like you said, they don't win. They don't culminate in this great win of seasons. Like, oh, they nailed it. They became the most winningest team. They came out from the bottom and now they're on the top. Like none of that shit. I'm just tired of so much of art, and maybe it's not art. It's just film, movies.
Consumerism.
It is consumerism. It's just the focus on like the celebrity culture. And it's when you do that, you stop valuing all the steps it take to get to the top, if you can get there, and just enjoying where you are. Like as a filmmaker, as independent filmmakers, we are not huge. Nobody really knows about us. We have a small collection of fans, and that's amazing. And we love every one of them. And we're excited for every other new one that shows up. But it's about community.
Yeah.
And it's about making art with other artists and spending time and creating something different and new and fun and entertaining. And we're not ever going to have the big accolades of some major studio player. But that doesn't devalue the work that we're doing. Right. And I think that's what makes this movie kind of special.
Yeah. We were talking about on the last podcast about how regional cinema is something that has kind of passed away in some ways. Like the backbone of it like has disappeared in this country. But this film feels very much like regional cinema in that sense of like, it's about this region. Like it couldn't have been shot anywhere else. It could have been shot in a Hollywood lot. It had to be shot in North Carolina. Yeah. It had to be shot in Durham. It had to be shot in this stadium. It had to be shot on these roads in this time, because that's what it looks like. And highlighting that, it's something that people talk about when they're like, what is representation? Why does representation matter? It's like, well, because we see it then, because we fucking see it then. If we're not seeing it, then we don't know it exists. If we don't know that these people exist playing baseball in these shitty conditions, like carrying their own luggage, not having groupies, not having huge fans or sold out arenas, like playing for a smattering of people in the darkest corners of this country, and they're still doing it with a professional sheen. There's an importance to that to give to other people who are like, I'm doing this fucking job, and that's just what I do to live, because I like to live and I need to do that here, and this is the job that I do. Like, it values the idea of people that are devalued by having no spotlight on them, by having no representation, or like, I think to this film how important it is that we have the faces and the leads that we do. That while Susan Sarandon is gorgeous, while Kevin Costner is gorgeous, and while Tim Robbins is gorgeous, none of them look like Hollywood stars today.
Correct.
They look like they would be these people in this town. They look representative of the world that they're playing in. Mm-hmm. And that matters a lot, because when Nuke gets picked up to play in the majors, he still looks like a buffoon.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like Timothée Chalamet and like knows how to stand for the camera. He just looks like a fucking moron. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of all of us when we're put into situations where we're not truly prepared.
Right.
And that matters, to see that and not see them do like just a comedy bit over I'm unprepared. No, he's trying his best. He's not good at it, but he's also being honest and honest to his own character. Those things matter for representation, so that people can feel like they can be seen instead of having to be something better or different.
Always be perfect.
Yeah.
To not always be perfect, right? Not to always be media savvy, to not always know exactly what to say. Yeah, there's something, I don't know, I really like this film. It's just a nice slice of Americana in the late 80s.
Yeah, 88, 89, something around there.
And what a wonderful little piece of cinema.
So that leads us into the question of like, how does a film like this get made? Does it get made today? It feels like a film of an era, and that we don't make films like this anymore.
Well, we don't. We don't make films that are successful because they made, $50 million, and it didn't cost that much to make. We make films that are only successful if they make $300 million. And it's a shame that we don't value the smaller pictures anymore. But to be clear, this film was exceptionally difficult to make back then. It was 2 years of Ron Shelton going around to all the studios on repeat, trying to get this film made. And what ended up happening was he had 30 days left to sell this film with Kevin Costner signed on. And on the very last day, when Kevin Costner was going to get pulled to do a different film, another movie of his came out for Orion Pictures. And it was an amazing review in the New York Times that morning. And so the studio was like, you know what? You're on. You can make this movie. We're going to greenlight it. And so it was 2 years of super hard work. And Kevin Costner going to bat for this, pun intended. And it was just luck. It was luck that it got made, but they didn't want to make it. They really fought it, and they really didn't want who Ron Shelton wanted to cast to play the parts.
Do you know if it was like The Untouchables that was the film, or No Way Out?
I think it was No Way Out.
Okay. Like it's funny to think of Costner in that era. Like he's doing huge films. Like
what happened was I think it was No Way Out. I'll double check. But what it was it was the first one that came out and said this man is going to be a star. And they had just released that movie in August, and so they were expecting the movie to just be a dud, but it wasn't a dud. And then they were off to the races with this film. So it was luck of that reviewer to write that wonderful of a review that night before that they read that morning, and then said okay on that last day of him being under contract.
That's fucking crazy.
Right. And so that film barely got made. This film barely got made. And then it led to all these other films.
Yeah.
I don't know if part of the reason it was challenging to get made was because who Ron Shelton wanted to put in the film, or it was challenging because it was a 2-act structure, which he really fought for this story, or if just, as they say, studio executives don't
have imagination.
Don't have imaginations.
Yeah.
And they can't visualize what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's thinking about like the fact that like, knowing that the casting was as difficult as it was, that Shelton had to fight for Tim Robbins. He had to fight for Susan Sarandon. Costner was a big enough name to be able to shop it around, but like the studio wanted anybody, it seems, than Susan Sarandon. And I have to believe that it was in part because she was 42 at the time, 41 when it was shot, and that they didn't know if she could do comedy, even though she had been in Rocky Horror Picture Show. Like,
so good.
Like they just didn't know. Again, no imagination. What did Noel Gallagher say? Just give the audience whatever the fuck you want because they don't know what they want. And that's the same fucking shit as studio executives. They just have the money. They just don't know.
Yeah.
They're all afraid and they don't know. Sarandon had been around forever doing films, from being in Louis Malle films like Atlantic City or being in Rocky Horror Picture Show. And like, I think that this film eventually led to her like having the renaissance in the 90s that she did with Thelma and Louise and Dead Man Walking and all these really high points that she moved on to. And the fact that she wasn't considered to be this incredibly fun, down-to-earth, sexy 42-year-old in a town full of 20-year-olds playing baseball is fucking nuts to me.
And what a great character.
Yeah.
Right? To have a woman who's single and very sexual and has no children and is a professor, has her career, has her home, has her passions, knows exactly who she is and exactly what she wants. What a wonderful, sexy character. How often do we get that now?
Not.
Right? We never celebrate women who are child-free. We never celebrate women who are single. You know, I mean, I don't say never, but movies now are always like, we got to move towards having romance where it's forever and you have your babies and you have your family because we're always pro-natalism. And this is just a really lovely middle-aged woman who's a badass and sexy as fuck and is sleeping with all the 20-year-olds.
Yeah.
Why not? Guys are doing it all the time. Why can't we?
Yeah.
I love it.
And why is there an expiration date? Right, because you have Millie, who is kind of her foil to Annie's being, who's also doing all these things in town, and is a kind of the one groupie for the
whole team.
For the whole team.
Gosh, I wouldn't call her a foil. I would say she was Annie's mentoring her.
Right, I guess, but like we have opposite ends of the spectrum, kind of age. Like one who's really young and naive, and one who's like we have a parallel between Nuke and Crash for both.
Right, Annie and Millie, Nuke and Crash.
Like we have these perfect foils for each other, or perfect parallels, and it fits in with what you're saying. We have 2-act structure. We have twos. These two people, like Millie ends up marrying an equally naive player, and Annie ends up with Crash, but their relationship very clearly isn't defined at the end of the film. He says to her, I have a lot of time to hear all of your crazy theories, and I want to hear them. And so you have the feeling that the relationship could go on, but he's not saying, let's move to this next town together. And she's not saying, let's move together to this next place. Their relationship is really open-ended at the end, even though you have, like Crash's dream, a lot of hope for possibilities in the future. Yeah. Like you'd like them to be together, but there's no guarantee that any of this is going to work out. It's just hopeful. It's really nice. Lovely.
It's really nice.
Yeah. One of the things that I have struggled to try to figure out where the act break is for the film. When he talks about it being a 2-act structure. I recognize that it's probably like there probably is one, and I just haven't ever spent enough time focusing on what it is. And it might be up until the point where the team goes on the winning streak, and then the second act is the winning streak through the end.
I guess
like that would make the most amount of sense to me.
Yeah.
That the first act is all struggle, and the second act is what happens when you're on a winning streak. How do you build up a player to get to this position, and then once they get to that position, what happens to them?
And is the removal of Nuke as the obstacle between Annie and Crash just the last few minutes of the film, or is that the act break once Nuke goes away? I don't know.
Like, I think that, like we talked about this as well offline, but I think that the film is interesting because it's about 3 people. It isn't, even though Annie narrates portions of the film, so it feels like it's her story. It also is Nuke's story, and it's also Crash's story, and each one is kind of given equal time without it being like, now we're going to focus on Nuke, now we're going to focus on Annie, now we're going to focus on Crash. They all kind of just weave in and out of each other's like sphere in a way that makes the narrative just naturally move to this story, to that story, to this thing. This is what's happening. I almost always have felt that the film really is just about Crash being there and what happens because of his inciting incident.
Of his existence.
Yeah. Nuke was always going to be there. There was always going to be, there's always going to be another Nuke.
Right. That was just her rotation. There was always somebody new coming in that she was going to give the best season ever to.
Right.
Through her mentorship.
And there was always going to be an Annie in
and
town.
And her booty.
Yeah. There was always going to be these two. And that Crash coming in, much like his name, he just crashes into this area. And suddenly all these things change because he is actually a mentor. He is actually somebody who can coach and teach and begrudgingly give life advice to. And because of his nature, the only thing that really happens in the film happens in this bracket of when he gets brought in and when he gets released once Nuke is sent to the majors. Like, that's kind of the pressure of the film. And then on both sides, we have a little bit of intro to that, and then we have to Nuke and Annie, and then we have a little bit of outro to Annie and Crash, with a little bit of just dusting of, oh, this is Nuke in the majors. This is what it's like when he's talking to the media.
You know what I find really interesting? I don't think Nuke makes it to the major leagues without both Annie and Crash.
Right.
Their mentorship, both of their mentorships, is essential. She teaches him so much, and so does Crash. They both teach him a lot, but they teach him different things.
It's like spirit and the mind. Like, it's the body and the soul type of, like, getting back to this kind of religious overtone of it. Like, you have the body of work, and then the soul, the body of work that Crash is teaching, and the soul that Annie is teaching, the spirit. Like,
right? She's helping him calm down. She's helping him focus. She's giving him different physical representations to keep his mind off of going off the deep end, keeping him focused. You're right. And then Crash is like, here's the work, here's how you do it, these are the rules, follow these rules, and you will get to X. And only through both of them, and I do find it very interesting that we never really see the coaches coaching.
No, they're terrible at it.
Yeah. But we see that they put people in a place to succeed. And that it is really interesting that actually as a pair, the two of them would make an amazing coaching team.
Yeah.
Annie would have to learn, unless Crash was open to it, to not be sleeping with all the players.
Right.
But if they were both open to it, I mean, yeah, why not? Girl,
Right.
Do your thing. It would be such an extraordinary team. But of course, a woman in the 80s would not be allowed to be on the coaching squad, even though she clearly is extraordinary at it. She can pay attention. And I love that the coaches value her insight. If she's giving you that insight, you listen.
Yeah.
She knows what she's talking about.
Well, she spots off the top that Nuke isn't bending his back on his follow through, and it helps him through his first professional game. Like, I diminish her importance when I say that she's just there for the spirit. Like, she has technical skills and knows the game as well as Crash does. But what she can actually offer people that Crash doesn't is this kind of emotional release or this spiritual engagement to the body of work that they're doing, whereas Crash is more like, these are, as you said, these are the rules, these are the things to do, but he is also open to this other world, and it's to this other kind of side. And when the scene, I think, that is really fascinating, both for like how it's handled in its queerness, but also how it changes Nuke's world, is the scene in which he's putting on the garter for the first time. And he says to Crash, when Crash comes upon him, like, Annie says it's going to open up my left side of my brain so I'm more artistic and less like up in it, and that I should listen to you. And Crash is like, well, she's a very smart lady. And then he tells him to put the rose in the front because that's where it goes. And like, in a scene that could both be incredibly homophobic and demeaning, the scene actually becomes about how these two people are open to the experience of making themselves better through whichever manner gives them that achievement. And while there are later moments where Crash uses derogatory terms towards queer people in a moment of aggression with Annie, and Nuke has a panic dream of being naked on the pitching mound, only wearing a garter, I think that speaks more to what the 1980s was, and to the misogyny and queer phobia that still exists within a lot of professional sports, than saying that they're right and queer people should be put down. I think it speaks more to their characters than to a cultural phenomenon that is trying to be pushed upon
influential.
people. Yeah.
Influential. Yeah. No, I agree with you that it's just that is the interesting thing about cinema, is that you get a snapshot of, depending on the film, you can get a snapshot of the perspective of the time. And I think that it was a bit more progressive than that time allowed. And I agree. Yeah.
But it's like, I think that scene means a lot. Like, because as much as I kind of tangented onto how it could work in queer coding, and that the actual idea in that scene of listening to how to be more artistic in regards to your profession is never a bad idea. Like, expanding what you're able to take in your mindset so that you can then filter it through your specific experience is never a bad thing. Like, it at least gives you something to bounce the idea off, even if the idea doesn't work necessarily for you.
I like that.
And one of the things that I think that this film does also well is populate the entire world with the town. Like, you have the guy who's the clown who dances before the games or in between innings. You have, in doing research of the film, I found out that a lot of the extras that are in the film were actual minor leaguers that they hired to do specific things. Like, if they're like if the scene called for somebody throwing a ball from left field to the catcher on one hop, and then there to be a crash at the plate between the catcher and the person running home, they knew who to get. So they found people who could actually perform the tasks, who weren't stunt people, but were professional athletes who could do that, so that it looks right.
Such a great idea.
And I think that that's the other thing about the film, that, like, at times when we talk about a film and say, oh, it wouldn't be made today, it's partly because the population of the world would be through extras that they get through a union, rather than, oh, these are the people that will come to the game, these are the people that are in the town, we're going to fill this scene with the town so that it feels like the town, rather than what we at times get right now is, oh, this feels like a Hollywood set.
Yeah, everything feels like a CW.
Right.
Everybody's stunningly beautiful and perfectly fit and chiseled with white teeth and nose jobs, and it's just so boring.
Like, you think about the scene, you can think about the scene where the manager of the team yells at the team because they're doing so terrible. And he gets everybody into the shower, and you look at all these bodies, and you look at all these male bodies, and all of them are really fit, but none of them look like Brad Pitt in fucking Fight Club. None of them have six packs that have six packs. None of them are so unbelievably fit that you're like, how the fuck do you exist in the world? You're like, no, these are just professional athletes. They look like they're athletic. They don't look like gods because they don't spend their time trying to be godly.
And they're not all waxed to hairlessness. Yeah, no, it's nice. It's refreshing. I love that. Yeah. I do prefer the authenticity of regional cinema, and I prefer the authenticity of Hollywood films that are treated like regional cinema. It's, I don't know. We've gone off the deep end with what people have to look like now. It's just ridiculous. Everybody's plastic. No wonder Barbie did well. And the other thing I like is that Kevin Costner was a baseball player and in high school, and had aspirations to be a baseball player, and ended up in film. And I think that shows. So it really helps that both Susan Sarandon and Kevin Costner were good at hitting. So in the scene where they're at the batting cages,
which is fucking awesome.
She was great.
Yeah.
She was great at hitting the ball. She only missed one time, and that was obvious. I don't know if that was on purpose or if that was part of the writing, but I mean, she crushes all those hits, and he is fantastic with the bat. It feels really natural in his hands. Yeah. And I actually can't say that necessarily is true for Tim Robbins. I read that he actually hurt himself really badly right at the beginning. Yeah, he tore like his rotator cuff, so he couldn't throw the ball the way that he wanted to. And he pulled it off. Yeah. Anyway, and there's something, I think that actually worked. Yeah. Because he felt crazy in his throwing. Yeah. But Yeah, the way Kevin Costner holds the bat, it just feels like it's an extension of him. Mm-hmm. And when you're with professional athletes or you're with people who are aspiring to be professional athletes, they're just like part of whatever sport they're playing. It's just all just an extension of themselves. And I felt like that.
Yeah, it's always hard to watch a sports film in which somebody plays a sport who obviously cannot. When they're shooting a basketball awfully, or they're running, and you're like, that person's never run in their life. Like, there's something about having the bodies be able to do the things they're supposed to do, and like the fact that from the lore, Costner hit 2 home runs when the cameras were rolling, and his character is supposed to be a great home run hitter in the minor leagues. Like, there's a lot of things that are just nice touches that make the authenticity of the film feel so much more
tangible.
Yeah, even like the criticisms of like calling him nuke, calling him meat, the terms for endearment of criticism and then positivity. I have a love-hate relationship with Kevin Costner's performances over the career. Like, I think he's probably properly rated as an actor, but that's because I feel that there's some really shitty things that I don't love of his, and there's things that really, really work for me. But the moments that really work for me in this film with him are things like when he's shitting on Nuke for being like, that was a really great inning. It's past. He's like, can I enjoy the moment? He's like, the moment's over. And then he goes up and stands in the batter circle and smiles with all the confidence of all the fuckboys in the world and says, if he throws me a curveball, I'm taking him out of town. And you're like, yeah, motherfucker. That's why people would follow him, because he's charming, engaging, and confident and can criticize with enough sweetness.
I love that.
It's an interesting film because I think that for me, there's so much of it that still taps into that childhood that I had, that it reminds me of the good things about loving baseball when I was a kid, and loving the stupid jokes and loving the camaraderie of the idea of teams that I still fucking adore today, and it matters a lot. Like that tie to both the past and the future that a film like this brings to me.
And for me, it's a vibe. And I like that. Everybody needs a summer vibe movie.
Yeah.
This is my summer vibe movie.
It's great.
Well, Austin, is there any film you would like to recommend to stumble upon next?
Yeah, I want to recommend Working Girl, film of the same year of 1988, directed by Mike Nichols, starring Melanie Griffith, Sigourney Weaver, and Harrison Ford. It is a fucking awesome film about a woman struggling in the workplace in the late 80s. And Harrison Ford is, even though he's listed as the first credit in the film, he's a supporting role. And he's phenomenal in a really funny part. Like a very interesting part that I could see now being cast with someone like Ryan Gosling or somebody else who can diminish their own importance and be very witty and funny and charming. But it really is an incredible role for Melanie Griffith. It's a wonderful role for Sigourney Weaver, and Joan Cusack's in it, who I fucking love.
I love her.
Like, I remember back in the 90s reading reviews of people going, Joan Cusack is so fucking great. Why isn't she in more things? And I didn't get it. And now in the 2020s, I'm like, Joan Cusack should have been in every fucking film. There would never be a film that would be worse off for her being in it.
She's phenomenal. She's a phenomenal actor. She's hilarious. She brings amazing energy every time. She always knows her character really well. Has she been in anything lately?
I don't know.
I miss her.
Yeah, I miss the shit out of her. Like, we still get Alec Baldwin, who's also in this film being a shithead. Yeah. We still get Alec Baldwin all the time. Where the fuck is Joan Cusack?
Where is Joan Cusack? Or we're starting this is going to be a movement.
Yeah.
Bring back Joan Cusack.
Yeah. Where is she, and why can't she be in this film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This film would be better with Joan Cusack.
Yeah.
Go.
Is this film better without Joan Cusack? Fuck you. It's like the same thing with M. Emmett Walsh when he was still working. Like there's hardly a film around that M. Emmett Walsh is in that you're not like, yeah, that film, that's fucking great. Yeah. Like, he was fucking great.
He made everything better.
Yeah.
So does Joan Cusack.
Yeah.
I'm here for this.
So, Working Girl, fucking great. It's on Hulu right now,
good.
But find it, watch it, just enjoy the shit out of it. Have some popcorn and enjoy the shit out of this film.
It's a great film.
Emily, is there anything that you're stumbling upon or would like to stumble upon?
I would like to recommend that you stumble upon the movie State and Maine, directed and written by David Mamet. State and Maine is possibly one of my all-time favorite films. It came out in 2000. It is actually starring Alec Baldwin, Sarah Jessica Parker, William H. Macy, and
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of my all-time favorites, and Rebecca Pidgeon. It's a really good film about what happens when Hollywood comes to a small town in America and takes over. It's a really great film to pair with Bull Durham because it's another slice of Americana, but a completely different vibe. I love this film because it just shits all over Hollywood, just everybody's skewed perspective that comes out of Hollywood. And I love how it pairs it with the simple, straightforward, direct perspective of like this small town in Vermont. But it is funny as hell. It is so funny. It is making fun of everybody. It has some of the best one-liners. I mean, I love, how do I make a movie called The Old Mill if the old mill is burned down?
Well,
and Rebecca Pidgeon's line is,
first thing you're going to have to do is find a new title.
yeah, change the title.
You're gonna have to
Gotta change the title. It's a fucking great line.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal film.
It's so good. So if you're feeling summery and you just watched Bull Durham and you want another film that, very different, but still has that kind of vibe.
Yeah, no sports unless you consider getting a lure caught in your finger, the hook of a lure from a fishing line caught in your finger, a sport. That's the closest you're going to get to a sport.
There's a fish hook in your finger.
That's what you got there.
Oh my gosh. I love this movie. So watch State and Maine. It's really good.
As always, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us, talking some nonsense about a film that we fucking love.
Yeah, we always appreciate having you here with us.
Yeah.
So you can find us on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube at Fishtown Films. Please message us if you have any requests or anything you want to talk about. It's probably best to DM us on Instagram. We'll see that first.
Yeah.
We really enjoy spending time with you and sharing movies with you.
And if you're so inclined, a great way to support us is to watch our film Citywide on Amazon. It's streaming now.
It's a sapphic romance that takes place in Philadelphia. It's a really fun, wild 24 hours of one woman coming down from New York and not being prepared for what Philly has to offer.
Not at all.
So watch Citywide on Amazon streaming right now. Rent, buy it, invite your friends over, have a movie night. We would be so appreciative of you watching what we make.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for spending time with us.
Bye.